If you're still on the fence about Marvel's Spider-Man 2, there are probably a few questions you're wondering about before you take the plunge on this $70 game. Things like, do I need to play the first 2 Spider-Man games to be able to enjoy and understand what's going on? What's different about this game that makes it worth picking up? Is this a multiplayer game? Does it play any different from the previous games? And most importantly, is it worth the price tag? I'm Randy from Gaming Gig, and today I'll be answering those questions and giving my first impressions on Marvel's Spider-Man 2. Before we get started, if you like gaming discussions like this one, make sure to subscribe. Our goal right now is 32,000 subscribers, and we're not too far off, so a big thanks to everyone who has subscribed so far. And as for Spider-Man 2, this video will be spoiler free, so no worrying about that, I got you. And also, I'm not finished with the game yet, but I have been playing it pretty heavily since it came out, and I definitely have some opinions. First, one of the big questions is, do you have to play the first 2 games to enjoy this newest one? I've heard a lot of people say that yes, you absolutely need to play the other games first. And although I think that's probably the best thing you can do, I'm going to push back on that idea a little bit. Although I've definitely been guilty of it before too, I really don't like it when other gamers make newcomers feel like they shouldn't play the newest game in a series just because they haven't played any of the earlier games. It kind of feels gatekeepy, and it can honestly turn off new players from trying any game that's a sequel. On a related topic, by the way, I think it's really confusing that they're calling this game 2 when it's the 3rd game. I get that Miles Morales may technically be considered a spin-off, but calling this game Spider-Man 2 still seems a little odd to me, but that's not really important. The truth is, no, you don't have to play the first 2 games to enjoy Spider-Man 2. There is a little recap video at the beginning of the game that you can watch that does an okay job of catching you up with the events of the previous 2 games. I honestly think that you could probably get by with just watching that and you'd be okay, but there are also tons of great recap videos on YouTube that you can watch that do an awesome job of summarizing the events of both the previous games. Watching those would be an even better way to catch yourself up so that you can feel better prepared to take on this newest game, even if you haven't played any of the other ones. Basically, if you want to skip straight to this newest game because you want to be playing the same game that everyone else is playing right now, I say go for it. Sure, those other games are both amazing and I highly recommend playing them, but that doesn't mean you have to. Moving on, one of the things that makes Spider-Man 2 different from the previous games is that it has 2 playable main characters, Peter Parker and Miles Morales. And this almost makes it seem like the game might just be a multiplayer game where you and a friend can team up and play the game together, but unfortunately, that's not the case. This is a single player game only. Yes, there are 2 playable Spider-Man characters, but you can't play both at the same time. The game just has you swapping back and forth between Peter and Miles throughout the campaign. It's actually not that different from the way that Grand Theft Auto 5 handles its multiple playable characters. And being able to play as both Miles and Peter is super fun because each has slightly different controls and abilities. It really keeps the gameplay fresh and engaging, and I think it's a really cool feature. And speaking of controls, this game does have some new abilities that weren't in the previous games. There's definitely some cool stuff that I'm not going to talk about because I don't want to spoil anything, but some things that you probably already know about is Peter's symbiote abilities, and of course the new traversal ability, which comes in the form of a wingsuit. But overall, there's not that much that is monumentally different from the previous games. If you like Spider-Man 1 or Miles Morales, you'll like Spider-Man 2. And if you are new and you end up playing Spider-Man 2 first and end up enjoying it, you'd probably love to go back and play the first 2 games. However, if you didn't really like either of the previous games, I don't know that there's a whole lot that I could say to convince you that you might like this one, except for one thing. You know, in the first Spider-Man game, there were definitely times when the main quest line would come to a halt, and the game would ask you to do a good bit of just generic open world collecting missions. And then after a while, you could get back into the main story's action. I could definitely see that being something that would turn off a lot of gamers. And I can say that although Spider-Man 2 definitely has its fair share of open world collecting, it's more or less completely optional. If you want to just focus on the combat and stealth-driven main story, you can pretty much ignore all the open world collecting. Some people love that stuff, but I totally get it if you don't. And I think that if you're one of those people who didn't like that stuff in the original Spider-Man, Spider-Man 2 will be much more enjoyable than that first game, or even Miles Morales. Now for the $70 question, is Spider-Man 2 worth the price tag? I'll be honest, I'm super cheap. I hate buying $70 games, but this was an occasion where I wanted a copy of the game for my collection, so I forked out the full $70. It hurt to do it, but fortunately, I'm happy to report that I've been loving every second of this game. You probably have figured that already by the way I've been talking about it, but yeah, this game is great. The opening is extremely epic. It's one of the best openings from any game that I've played in quite some time. Even beyond the opening, the game just has so many great spectacle moments. It's a great example of how video games just keep rivaling or even surpassing movies in terms of cinematic goodness. The combat is super similar to the older games, but there are a few new additions like a parry mechanic. I'm not sure this game actually needed a parry. The combat was already great, but it doesn't really detract from the combat, and it does give you just one more tool to add to your combat moveset. I've also really been enjoying the story so far, but I'm not going to go into that too much because I think it'll be more fun to experience that on your own. But needless to say, my first impressions have been extremely positive. I've heard that some people have been experiencing some glitches, and although I've had like one or two little things pop up, I really haven't had anything too noteworthy happen in terms of bugs or issues like that. Overall, the game seems pretty polished and stable, at least from what I've experienced. But now I want to turn it over to you. If you've been considering the game but haven't pulled the trigger yet, I'd love to know what it is about the game that has made you pause and think, well, maybe I can wait on this, or maybe I'm not that interested. Or if you have been playing the game, what do you think about it? I'll definitely be replying to as many comments as I can, but if you want an even more direct way to chat with me, consider joining the Game and Gig Discord server. I'm hanging out there every single day. There's an invite link in the description of the video, and I'll go ahead and tell you, it's the most welcoming Discord server you could ever imagine. The people there are all super kind and just love to talk games. It's a great community to become a part of, and of course, it's completely free. Well, I'll let you go there. I'm Randy from Game and Gig, and I'll see you next time.